This is episode 8 with special guest Michele Simpson. Just show up. If life, babies, and business and busyness all seem to distract you from prayer, this is the reminder that you just need to show up anyway. You're listening to Persistence in Prayer with professionally trained Catholic mindset coach, Kylie Hine. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Persistence in Prayer with Catholic Mindset Coach Kylie Hine. This week, I am joined by Michele Simpson. Michele has been married to her husband for 29 years. She is a mother of 10 children. She's been a homeschool mom for 23 years while also helping to run a family business at her house. She has recently joined the Metanoia Catholic community and will begin working on coaching certification soon. Michele, thank you so much for being here. I feel very blessed to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to jump in and talk about prayer life a little bit. But one of the things that I know we've talked about briefly is you said that you were a fallen away Catholic. So are you a cradle Catholic, like born and baptized early?
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your story and being like how you fell away and how you found your way back to the church?
So falling away, it's not like I didn't necessarily believe the faith. I just wasn't, attending mass on a regular basis. And that kind of started in college.
Mm-hmm.
And then met my husband, and we got my mom passed away right after we got engaged, and we kind of eloped because we're kind of in a hurry to get married, and there was all this drama that my dad wanted certain things to happen or whatever. So Chris and I were like, well, we're just gonna go get married. So we got married. He had 2 kids, so I was helping raise his 2 kids. And shortly after getting married, I was pregnant with our first, and it wasn't until my second child, so sometime in between there, we started going to mass more often, and we had baptized his 2 children, and so we had first communion for the children, for the younger daughter, and we couldn't participate because we weren't practicing. He had been married before, so there was all these different things that we had to do. That's what kind of like, oh, I need to get more serious about this. So I just slowly started becoming more serious. And then there was some problems that had come up, and I started relying on God at that point for my support. And so we just started. So he ended up coming into the church right after our second was born, 4th child, but my second birth. And so he came in that Easter. I think it was 4 days after she was born, and I made sure I was at the service. And some old man comes up to me and goes, "Why are you here with that baby?" Like, because my husband's coming into the church.
That's amazing.
And then shortly after that, we got married in the church. And shortly after that, we started homeschooling.
There's so much of your story that I can relate to. I feel like I was also cradle Catholic, but my college years, I definitely fell away, was not going to mass every weekend. My university, there were some Catholics, but we were kind of few and far between. And those of us that were, like, I wasn't surrounded by a community of people that were going to mass every weekend. And so for me, it was actually after I had kind of started going back my senior year of college. And then I got hired at a Catholic school, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to make sure I'm showing up every week. And just seeing the faith of the kids there, I think was really incredible too. And then the other thing you said that I can really resonate with is your mom passing away. My mom passed away when I was 22, 23. And so I can resonate with that too. And I think, I don't know if this had an impact on your faith life at all, but I feel like that was a big turning point for me too. In going from intention to do better in my prayer life and do better showing up for God to like actually doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, I was 25 when my mom passed away, and
Okay.
I'm the oldest of, my mom had 6 children. So my youngest sibling was in 8th grade.
Oh, wow.
So a couple in college and several in high school, and then Carly was in 8th grade. So it was a really interesting time for my family of origin. It was just a very hard time. So yeah, prayer definitely was helping to get us through that.
Yeah. My brother was a senior in high school, so he was the youngest. And that's hard to kind of, you have to show up for
Hmm.
them too. So that's really cool.
Hmm.
And also, so your husband wasn't Catholic, so you were kind of like the person that was drawing your family to the faith.
Yes, correct. Yes. That was important to me that they were baptized, and um, that we were doing, you know, going through the sacraments and all of that. And then as I was doing that for my stepchildren, like, well, we need to be doing it ourselves as husband and wife. So that kind of brought us, it was kind of a profound moment because my dad received communion that day when our second oldest received communion. But my husband and I were sitting in the pew because we weren't married in the church, so we knew we weren't supposed to be receiving. So I was
Can
like,
you?
this doesn't work. How can we
Yeah.
be a good example this way?
So I remember as a kid, my mom was Catholic, my dad was not. And my mom took us to Mass every single week. She taught CCD, but she also could not receive for many years because my dad had been married before. Can you
Hmm.
tell me, like, what that's like? I mean, I just remember her always, they eventually were married in the church so that she could receive, but there were many years where she showed up every single week and couldn't receive the Eucharist. And I've always wondered what that was like for her.
I would imagine that would have been really hard. I mean, hard in a sense, like, because you want to receive, right? You're there and you want to receive. And now you're doing the correct thing by not receiving. And it's hard to continue. I think it would be hard to continue going when you're not able to receive, right? I don't remember that for me so much. The feelings I had, I'm not in contact with those. I just know that it was important that we got our ducks in a row because this isn't the way I want to live my life as we were going forward. So, and I was lucky. My husband was on board. We
Yeah.
agreed.
Yes, that's always great. So, as you had these children raised in your home, how did you maintain a connection with God or continue to grow closer? Because I only have two children in my home and I know how crazy it can be. So, tell me a little bit more about what that looks like or what it looks like at your house.
So as we started homeschooling, we started doing a daily rosary. And the daily rosary at that point was happening kind of at the end of the day, or sometimes would happen in the car, depending on how busy we were. But a lot of times it would just happen at the end of the day. As we progressed as a family, um, we found as my children were playing lots of sports that it wasn't easy to do it in the late afternoon, that there was always children missing, or I wasn't home driving them everywhere. So we started doing it as the beginning of the day thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be the first thing we did after we were up and moving. We come downstairs and pray the rosary as a family. And then, again, I have only 2 teenagers left. I have 4 children in the home, but 2 of them are teenagers, and the other 2 work. So it's harder now because I have days that I'm not here, or my husband's going. We're trying to figure out how to make that work as a family rosary still, but we still get it in most days, so that's good.
That's awesome.
So that was the first step.
Do you have any advice for me as a mom? I have a 4-year old and a 7-year old, and the family rosary has always, like, that wasn't even something that I would have thought of growing up. Like, that just didn't happen in my house. Like I said, it wasn't that my parents didn't talk about their faith, but we did not have family prayer time. We didn't pray together per se, other than, at family gatherings or birthday parties, my dad would lead prayer before, like, he would lead a blessing, and then we would say
Mhm.
our Catholic prayer before meals. So in my own family, I've started to try to incorporate more of these things. I have a lot of personal devotions and prayer time, and that is growing with my children. You know, we have routines that we have at night and in the morning. And one of them is a daily rosary in the car because it's about the perfect amount of time from our
Hmm.
house to where their school is. How do you get your children engaged? Some days they're like, okay, yeah, like we'll maybe make it through a decade. And some days they are imagining and playing all kinds of things in the back and throwing things back and forth.
And that's hard. I learned from others. So it wasn't something my family of origin did, but it was something my mom's family of origin did. My grandfather would lead a rosary, I think, every night after dinner. And
Okay.
I remember that whenever we'd have dinner at my grandfather's house, him leading the rosary. Um, so then when I started homeschooling and these other families that I was getting to know through homeschooling, they were doing the rosary. So I'd ask them questions and stuff like that. And then um, at some point, I was at one of their houses while we did the rosary, and someone had a book, like a 3-ring binder, and they had pictures of each of the different mysteries and all the prayers in there. So we would have our book and we would open it up for the kids to be able to see. So if it was, the visitation, you had a picture of the visitation, and the kids could at least look at it. And each were supposed to be holding a rosary, and sometimes kids would fall asleep. You know, we tried to have them at least kind of pay attention, and just kind of depends on the age and their attention span.
Yeah,
But I figured it was better that we were doing it in front of them than not doing it at all. That's
absolutely.
where my thought process was.
Yeah. And I go back and forth with that sometimes too.
That's a
Like
good example.
I feel like I get more out of my rosary time, like the meditation part of it when I do it by myself, but I also know how important it is for my kids to see me doing it. And there are days, every once in a while they'll say like, "Mom, can we listen to music today?" But there are a lot of days where like we're running late and maybe I don't start it right away, or I'm praying in my head, I'm not praying out loud. And my 4-year-old would be like, "Mom, you forgot to do your rosary," or we're supposed to be saying the rosary right now, even though he doesn't actually pray the whole thing. So that's a great reminder, though, of just showing up and doing it. Like your kids are going to catch more like from seeing you than you can actually teach them.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Okay. I want to jump to how do you stay persistent in prayer when you feel like you're failing sometimes? And I know you have a story about trying to implement St. Bridget's prayers.
Yeah. So I was struggling to be consistent with my own personal prayer. I was having babies every 18 months, so um, finding that time I was finding to be hard. So I think at some point I started doing like a morning offering by myself or something. And then at some point I wanted to do St. Bridget's 15 the 15 St. Bridget prayers for my family, for those that had fallen away, et cetera, or those that might fall away in the future. And you have to do that for a whole year. And I attempted it and I could not do it. I think it took at least 15 minutes to do all those prayers, if not a little bit longer. And it just seemed overwhelming. And so I basically gave up. And then a few years later, so my youngest was born in 2008. So somewhere between 2009 and 2011, um, I kind of intentionally said I need to start doing my own prayers. So I just started with a small list of prayers, and it's evolved to a book. It's evolved to my own little book I created
Wow.
with my husband's help. And it takes all the prayers I have in there. Some of them were from like my kids have gone to camp through our parish, and they have a little booklet so those prayers that were added at some point. Um, so it's just a collection of consecrating myself to Mary. So there's certain prayers I'm supposed to do for the consecration. So there's those in there. I do one that's technically Father Ripperger was the one that told me to do it. So Father Ripperger was a priest here in our area, and my husband and I had seen him, and so he told us to do this prayer called the Auxilium Christianorum. I think I'm saying it correctly, and it's a longer prayer, and I've been doing that since the day he asked us to do it. We were supposed to do it as a couple. We haven't done well as a couple at doing it, but I haven't given it up. And so there's just all these little prayers that I do in the morning. And then at some point in the last, so about, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3, I went back and I visited doing the 15 St. Bridget prayers, and I did it for a whole year. I was very proud of myself, but I had to, I think, so what I guess my point is to that is that by building up the muscle of getting up every day and doing prayers, I was finally able to successfully do something that meant a lot to me to do. And when I first started the process of doing the daily prayers, there were, life would get in the way, so I wasn't always up early. I tried to, but there's been mornings I wasn't up early for whatever reason. And so there were times where I couldn't get them all in, and I would end up doing them in the car. Like I mean, so I have a little booklet. I don't have them all 100% memorized, but if I start the beginning of it, I pretty much know the prayer. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'll just take my little booklet with me. I think for the first couple of years, I was really consistent on making sure I did all of those prayers every day, no matter what. I remember being sick and driving my daughter to a soccer game, which was very far away with all the kids in the car. And I ended up having a fever. I had to drive from here to Boise, which is about a 6 to 8 hour drive. And I did stop, and I literally had a fever for a week. Someone else had to take care of all the kids when I got there. But I made sure every day in the car I got all of those prayers done. Which, I mean, in some ways is kind of crazy, but it was kind of like to prove to myself at that point that I could stick to something and be consistent. And I think that was really important to me at that point in my life.
Yeah. And just showing the Lord. I mean, I think a lot of times we get caught up in, like, if we show up in our prayer and we're distracted or we have all these thoughts, that's this terrible thing. But struggling in prayer and constantly returning back to the Lord is so much more important than having, the quote unquote perfect prayer time. And so I think that that's represented too in your dedication of just showing up and like showing God that I'm committed to spending this time with you. And one of my favorite sayings is pray as you can, not as you can't. Not all of us are at the same place in our spiritual journey, and you attested to that a little bit too. Like early on in your prayer life looked very different than it does now. I mean, now you spend a significant amount of time in the morning in prayer. I know for me, I spend much more amount of time in the morning in prayer, and it's shifted because now I plan everything else around my prayer time rather than it used to be prayer wherever I can fit it in. And if I do oversleep, which does happen sometimes, then it's like I say those extra prayers in the car, or I say those extra prayers while I'm doing the dishes. And the goal is to obviously be praying unceasingly anyway, but having that set amount of time where you can kind of, I think, shift a little bit from vocal prayer to more mental prayer is a huge game changer.
Yeah, and that praying unceasingly. So what's happened for me is that I'll find myself at night sometimes not able to sleep. And what I do to sleep, or what I'll even find when I'm struggling at night, is I'll be praying Hail Marys or the Rosary. Sometimes it will put me back to sleep, and sometimes I get frustrated because I've done a lot of Hail Marys or a lot of decades of like. I think one night in the last month I did 15 decades. I do 15 decades of the Rosary daily, personally. And pretty much each decade is for a different member of my family. And I had forgotten that day. So it does happen that I forget. And if I do forget, I try really hard to at least do 5 decades of the Rosary. But that day I'd forgotten. And so I ended up getting all done in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. It was kind of an interesting thing. I still couldn't sleep after the 15th. It took a very long time. I don't know what was wrong that night.
I have found, so there are, Dan Burke, I don't know if you know who that is. He talks about this a lot, about having like a plan of love. And they talk about this on spiritualdirection.com too. And so part of my plan of love is is the daily rosary, along with, my morning mental prayer and my daily examen at night and those kinds of things. And I have found when the day has gotten away from me or I'm out of my routine and so I didn't get my rosary in at my regular time or I couldn't finish it, sometimes I will wake up in the middle of the night and I end up finishing it. And so that's fascinating that that happens to you sometimes too, or it seems like you're getting those extra Hail Marys in. And you'll just wake up and that's what comes to your mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really cool.
And another good thing, I don't know if anybody's ever heard this before, but another nice thing is when you do fall asleep praying the rosary, your guardian angel will finish it for you. I find that to be a beautiful thought. So like if I didn't finish it, at least I know that my guardian angel is finishing it for me.
Mm. Also, so Father Ripperger was close to you?
No, not close. He was at a parish here, which wasn't our actual home parish at the time. It is now. And there was just something going on and we were told that we should go see him. So we made an appointment and we went and had a meeting with him as husband and wife.
Oh.
And it was very helpful. And then he quickly was transferred like within a month or two after that. So I've met him. In fact, he was here for a funeral a couple weeks ago. And so he came for the funeral. And one of the ladies I was talking to, she's like, I'm going to go up and talk to him because he was very helpful during a time in her life. And I was impressed because she actually went and did it. Because I thought about that. I'm like, well, he's not going to remember me. I mean, it was just one time that he ever met me. And she had gone up several times trying to get help. She was going through a really hard time. And he didn't remember when he saw her. But when she talked about the situation, I was like, oh, yeah, were you? I also wanted to get a picture with him while I was here, but I was too chicken.
Yeah. So for anyone listening,
you don't want to be that person
who doesn't know who Father Chad Ripperger is, he is an exorcist and he has some incredible YouTube videos out. And then I'm curious, is this the Deliverance Prayers book? Do you have that one?
It's in there. Yes.
It's in there. Okay.
It is inside
William Christie prayer that you talked about is in here. Okay.
Yes, it is.
So for anyone listening that has never heard of that, this is Deliverance Prayers for Use by the Laity by Father Chad Ripperger. So it's a small little black book. And I think I heard about it probably about a year ago. And I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the prayers in here. And I think they're very helpful. So if you're looking for something to add to your prayer list, that might be something to check out.
Good resource.
Yes. What are your other favorite prayer resources, either for yourself or that you've utilized with your kids? Do you have any favorites that come to mind?
That's an interesting question. So for many, many years, I have used, from the beginning of my days, beginning to my prayer life, I would use the Pieta prayer book.
Okay.
So that was my beginning. I really liked, what is it called? It's like this, but it's for the English Mass. I attend a Latin Mass, so I have now Benedictus, and it's a little book that has all the readings for each day of the week. And there's a counterpart for the English Mass, and I used to get that. Magnificat. So I used to use the Magnificat, and now that I go to the Latin Mass primarily, I get the Benedictus because it has a morning prayer in there, or morning, what would they call it? Morning, I think. Yeah, morning devotion. So I pray that. My other resources I guess they came from the Pieta, and then I was talking about the prayers that that they would have in a booklet that they created for the camps that they thought the kids should be doing, which were act of faith, act of hope, act of charity. And then the others are ones that are from making a consecration. So I do the little crown of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I don't know if many people have heard of, but it was in my consecration book, and it was something that that you should say daily. And it's a longer one.
Did you do the full Louis de Montfort's consecration, or did you do one of
I did.
The full one? Me too. And I've also done 33 Days to Morning Glory, but I think I used 33 Days to Morning Glory as a preparatory for doing the full one, and I had a friend who recommended like do the whole thing, and it was so worth it for me to do the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I did Louis de Montfort, and then last year I did the 33 Days to Glory. I haven't renewed this year, and I passed my time, but I did the Mystical City of God with Michelle Dunn. So
Okay.
I've read the she did a book study on this book it's by Venerable Mary of Agreda, and it's about the life of Mary. It's called The Mystical City of God. And it's this is the abridged version. So it just took up, I mean, there's only so much time in a day.
Yes.
So I haven't gotten to my renewing my consecration, which is on my list of things to actually do. And I'm also now reading the full version of that Mystical City of God, but very slowly with one other friend from my area.
Yeah.
So
I am a total book nerd, and I actually just today I was running errands and I stopped at a thrift store and they had the Diary of Saint Faustina, and I was like, "Oh, it's only 74 cents. Like add it to my book collection." But like you said, it's so hard, and then the further I journey in my prayer life, the less I actually read during I mean, I don't do a lot of spiritual reading during my prayer time at all, or even my adoration hours. I don't really read, so it's like then you need extra time for your spiritual reading. But the one
mhm.
thing I have used a lot lately, like if I'm struggling to really enter into prayer, is, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, is The Better Part by Father Bartunek, and that's just on the Gospels. So it's still scripture reading, but it has some really great reflections. So I've used that this Lent a little bit too.
Give me a sec. Let me grab
Oh,
them.
okay.
I'll be right back.
For those of you who are on the podcast or listening to the podcast version and not the YouTube version, I will try to put a list of all of these in the notes so that you can access them fairly quickly. And if that's something that you are interested in ordering or looking for, I always recommend going through thrift books if you don't want to buy them new. Or there are a couple of other Catholic sites that you can order your books through. Just trying to support those Catholic organizations is always really awesome.
Okay, well, I'll have to give you the other book for you to put in there because I can't remember the name of it, but
Yeah.
so I'll find it and give you the name. But a good source is Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence
Okay.
from Tan Books. Good meditations in there. And then I have another one that was recommended by a priest, and it deals a lot with different things that I like, patience and trust and different things. So it's another one I've meditated on 2 times now. So gone through the whole book twice.
Yeah. You know, it's a good one
But
when
it
you go
wasn't
back.
on my bookshelf. So I'll have to find it for you.
Yeah. You know, it's a good book when you go back through it more than once.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So before we close here, I would like to know, you are going to start Catholic coaching certification. What led you to
Yes.
that? First of all, how long have you been receiving coaching?
I joined MCA a year ago during Lent.
Okay. Ooh.
And it's a funny story. It wasn't something I was looking for. I didn't really know about Catholic coaching. I knew about coaching before, but not Catholic coaching. And I wasn't looking for coaching. It just came across my feed, Instagram or Facebook, but it just kind of came across, and Aaron and Matt were talking, and it just kind of resonated with me. And I kind of thought, oh, that might help me to express myself better with people, or it just kind of seemed like something I needed. So and they were talking about coaching, so it talked about Purgative Way, I believe. And I kind of wanted to join Purgative Way at the time, but not even really understanding any of what anything was. I ended up joining the MCA, and then shortly after, I was so enthralled by what I was learning and how it was making a difference in my life that I talked to them about the coaching, and they started. So I was the first one in coaching, Catholic Coaching Foundations. I was the first person admitted to that.
Oh, I did not know that.
So I went through that whole thing all by myself mostly. And then when the cohort came up, I redid the whole thing again.
Very cool. So, for anyone listening that does not know or who hasn't heard me talk about this on the podcast, we're talking about Matt and Erin Ingold, who are the founders of Metanoia Catholic. Metanoia Catholic is they coach Catholic coaches. And so I was a member of Purgative Way. That is how I got my Catholic coach training. And I continue to be educated and train with Matt and Erin and the rest of their incredible group over there. They have phenomenal coaches, which is why I trust them to continue my coaching process as I go through it myself. I always want to get better. And I'm so excited that Michele is joining as well. And I think it's another testament of the transformation that happens when you get coached. Like you see that transformation in yourself and you want it so badly for others to just experience it. Because, like you, I wasn't looking, I think for me, it was kind of a pride thing like, I can figure stuff out on my own. You know, I didn't really need I wasn't looking for someone to help me. I more wanted to learn how to be a coach. And then I figured out that when I actually got coached, how much that transformed me. And it just made me even more passionate about becoming a coach myself.
Yes, I love how it changes how you look at a situation, and you're not always looking at the situation from just your eyes, and you can come and you can show up to different things just by changing how you're going to look at it. So you can show up more attentive to things that maybe you weren't dying to do just by changing the way you look at it.
Yes. And I think that's important too, as we're talking about prayer, showing up and being more attentive to things that maybe you don't want to do, like getting up at, for you, 4:45 in the morning. That is not something that sounds appealing to most people.
So
How did you start that?
so where I live in North Idaho. In the summer, it's bright at 4 a.m.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it doesn't get dark till 10. And I am more of a morning person than I am a night person. So at some point, I just started getting up earlier and earlier. I mean, sometimes I have to get up. So I do adoration 2 different days a week. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have a set hour that I'm committed to be at the Adoration Chapel. On Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thursdays, it's at 6 a.m. So that's a very difficult thing because I'm tend to be anal retentive. So I have to do all the prayers before I get to, because adoration isn't the time for me to do my normal prayers. That's an extra added on, like I should be doing some other stuff. So I get up earlier on those days so I can prep myself with the things that I would normally do in my day, and then get dressed, and it's a 20-minute drive to the church, and go and do some other things there, and come back. And then I do the same thing, but not as early. It's a 7 a.m. So I try to go to 6:30 mass and then go to 7 a.m. So I'm a little crazy. Not everybody can fit all of that in. And it's easier now that I don't have little kids. I mean, so if you have little kids, please don't feel like you should have to do anything like that, because that's way crazy. But you do what you can do as you can do it. That's how I would word it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely the truth. You start with 5 minutes. How do you fit 5 minutes of prayer into your day? And then you build and you build. And if you are truly connecting with the Lord, He's going to keep calling you to more, right? And you're going to desire more because you know the fruits that come from that relationship with Him.
I love how you said that, because it's true. The more that I've built my relationship up with God, the more I'm wanting to do and willing to do. And that's why, I'm sure it's a little overwhelming how much I said I do, but it's only because I've been called in my life to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it for different reasons. I have a lot to pray for. I have a lot of kids.
Amen. We all have a
And
lot
I
to
was
pray for. I
definitely
think
not
that's so true.
not the perfect person. So, and I have lots of siblings and stuff too. So, I mean, there's a lot of people to pray for in the world.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a perfect way to close this too, is just this reminder that wherever you are in your life, whatever stage of life you're in, your prayer life is going to look different, number one. Number two, we're all called to something. It doesn't have to look the same as someone else's, but we're all called to holiness. And number three, the reminder that as mothers, whether you are, I mean, you do business from home, so you're working, you're also homeschooling, whatever walk of life you are in, you can have deep, meaningful prayer lives and you can continue on that path towards sainthood. But you do have to make an effort and you do have to prioritize it. It doesn't just like fall into your lap and happen. Like you have to make the effort, especially at the beginning, to show up. And when you mess up or you fail, like you talked about with the St. Bridget prayers, like you failed, okay, you weren't ready for that at that point in your life, but you didn't just forget about it. You came back to it and you tried it again and you were successful.
Yep.
Just keep forging ahead. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was awesome. I can't wait till you publish your prayer book so that I can get a copy because I'm fascinated now. And I think as you start your own, whether you decide to do coaching business on the side or if you just decide to get the coaching for so you can coach your loved ones, whatever you decide to do with that in the future, I think that is something that people would be excited about. So let me know. I want to share it
Thank
with
you.
everyone.
Thank you for having me.
If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any episodes in the upcoming weeks. And remember, come get coached over on Instagram at Kylie M. Hine. All it takes is a quick DM and you can get set up with a free discovery call.